Victim blaming helps white supremacy. Work to end these tapes in your heads, and work to end these tapes in your family's heads and your friends' heads. Eric Garner's about dehumanization. Not one of the police or paramedics whose job is to serve and protect administered CPR to him. Society has sent a message that this is okay by not putting these people on trial for his murder. Even with direct evidence, the justice system sent a message that Garner's life is simply not that valuable. Demand transparency in our justice system. Demand that no person is above or not protected by the law. I'm sorry, I'm just a flavor. I got really heated last night. Okay. Eric Garner's about justice, so work to reform our courts so everyone has due process and accountability. Remember Martin Luther King Jr.'s wisdom. Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice.
Everywhere!
Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice.
Everywhere!
Eric Garner is about human rights, so stand in solidarity with those who are oppressed. Everyone deserves human rights. Eric Garner's about media representation, so realize the media has the power to unite a movement, but they also have a power to say, like Malcolm X said, if you're not careful, the newspapers will have you hating the people who are being oppressed and loving the people who are doing the oppressing. Learn to see past the media. Be really skeptical of portrayals of cops at this moment. Be really skeptical. Trust your instincts. Eric Garner's about free speech. He was denied his opportunity to question or disagree with an officer. So take this opportunity to express your outrage. This honors Garner's memory, and it pays respect to his family. Eric Garner's about the state of the United States right now. I can't breathe under the weight of all this. I can't breathe.
I can't breathe.
I can't breathe. Not so close to your mouth.
All right, all I have to say is that there is a very wise, very well-educated psychologist named Beverly Daniel Tatum, an African-American woman who's written a lot about racism. And one of the things she has said about racism is that it is a smog. It is a smog in the environment. In the same way that literal smog is something that no one person is responsible for, systemic, meaning system-wide racism, is not the responsibility of any one person. No one person caused it. However, we are all responsible for cleaning up our environment. We are all responsible for cleaning up racism. Smog is something that we all breathe in, whether we want to or not. It becomes part of us, whether we want it to be a part of us or not. Systems have absorbed racism in the same way that human beings have absorbed smog through our breathing. And unfortunately, the people who make up these systems, police and other bodies, are indeed taking all this in, and that is affecting their decisions and their judgment. Keep in mind, too, that you may have bad teachers, but that does not mean the education system as a whole needs to be destroyed, okay? We're not trying necessarily saying that that's the issue here. What we're saying is that we need to look at the systemic issues and to cure the root of these ills so that we do not have more cases of this happening. This is where it roots from. Thank you.
Hello? Do I need this?
Yeah.
I do? Okay.
No, you do.
Okay.
Yes.
Hi, my name is Carl Linskog. I teach history here. And yeah, I'm just so glad to be here with you all and to have this presence here. And I just I wanted to say a few things about history and a few things about sort of what we're doing after, because as you know, this is it's a die-in. We can talk a little bit about the nature of that action, but also this is a teach-in and a speak out, right? So I have my little speech stool over there. You're gonna have a chance to talk about that. And we'll talk about how we're doing and why we're doing what we're doing today, right? So, but I just want to ask you all a question first. know, we're thinking about a lot of people here today, beyond Eric Garner and Mike Brown. Those are the two people we've really been paying attention to a lot recently, right? But we might be thinking about people like John Crawford, who was an African-American man who was shot in Walmart. He just had picked up a toy gun off the shelf, and the police thought him a threat, and they shot him, right? We might be thinking about Tamir Rice, who's that child who was shot in the park. We might be thinking of Ramarley Graham, who was this young person in New York City who was shot in his bathroom fleeing from the cops. He had a little bit of weed on him, and they shot him. We might be thinking of lots of people, right? And ostensibly these are all separate cases, right? And they all have their unique circumstances, right? So my question for you is a real question, not rhetorical. I want some of you to respond right now if you're willing to, is aren't these all just isolated cases? And like, what does this have to do with racism? Because a lot of people are saying, like, why bring up race in all this situation, right? Can anyone speak to that? Aren't these all just isolated cases, and what does this have to do with race?
Well, they were all black.
Okay.
So.
So black men.
White officers.
White officers. Okay.
Yeah, they were given severe penalties when a white person would hardly be called on it, just like jaywalking.
Okay.
A little bit of weed, so it's like a dramatic response to something that's
We need a mic.
minor.
So I don't know if you could hear that, but you said it seems like a harsh response, the harshest response, actually, death, for just a minor infraction, if any infraction at all, right? You know, we're having a national conversation now about police brutality and systemic racism, and it's causing a lot of white people to confront this question of, like, what does race have to do with it? And this is a question that a lot of white people are asking, and they're sort of not sure what the answer is, right? And I just want to share something that one of my students said that is the best response that I've ever heard in response to this question, to the question of, like, why do we always have to insert race into this? What does race have to do with it? And my student said simply, well, it's about history, right? It's about history because if you know our history in this country, if you know the history of black people in this country, then you know that the law and the justice system has historically, since its origins in slavery, which was a system that was designed to protect the institution of slavery, after slavery, when there was segregation, Jim Crow, through the Civil Rights era and into the post-Civil Rights era with the war on drugs, mass incarceration, and a lot of things that some of you are probably learning about, the system quite often has a racial bias. And so why do we have to always talk about race? And why is race central here? Because that's something that's embedded in our history, and we're still dealing with that legacy, I think you might say. So, yeah, go ahead.
Could I just add, I think it's not enough just to know the facts, because we talked a little bit about this yesterday, but I think there's a deep history that is pervasive in our culture. I keep saying culture cultivates. It's what you hear in the media, what you're taught in school about work, when you're just walking, when you see movies, it's cultivated. Culture cultivates, and we forget. I keep going back to the Holocaust. How could that happen? How could these torture things happen? I'm going in lots of directions, but I think it's connected to the influence of culture. We have to take it very seriously. We're not rational.
So Professor Boudin is talking about the influence of culture and how culture plays such an important role in that. I definitely agree with that. The other thing I'll say, and then I'll yield the bullhorn to someone else, or maybe it'll be time for the die-in then, but the other thing I think is useful about knowing history is knowing about the history of these protest tactics that we're going to be seeing here today, and that are part of a long history and part of a much bigger picture. So you might know that at this very moment there are people protesting across the country, from Berkeley and Oakland to Chicago to Miami to New York City to Boston. The country is in turmoil over this. What's that?
To the UK.
Yeah, to the UK. It's international, right? So this is something that's part of a much bigger history, and this mode of social protest that you're going to be practicing and learning about here, this die-in, is also part of a long history, right? So going back to the 1960s, when civil rights activists sat in, they didn't die in per se, although sometimes they did, they sat in to disrupt things, to point out injustice. From the sit-ins came the die-ins, where you dramatize the death that's going on, whether it's a result of war or police brutality or other violence. right? Out of that same context came the teach-ins, where we started teaching each other about foreign policy, about Vietnam, and now we're teaching about police brutality, right? Even the sort of tactic of social disruption, right? Which is something that we're doing here, has a long history. Going back in American history, working people, people without power, political power, this is what you do. You would disrupt things because that's the only source of power you have. So you do the general strike, or you occupy a factory, or you occupy your university, right? So what you're doing today is part of a long and rich history of social protest related to civil rights and related to economic justice and all sorts of other things. So I think you should be proud of participating in this rich legacy.
So if you'll join us, what I want to do is I want to spread out, not too far, and I want to do the die-in. Those of you willing to do that, I want it to be 3 minutes. I want it to be a symbol of all the people that have died without justice. And I want people to be able to see what that looks like if these people were here at RVCC. I also just want to mention that after the die-in, I do have chalk. If you want to chalk yourselves or someone else on here to make something that will last at least throughout the day, feel free to do that. And so I'm going to call it, yeah, no, after. Yeah, so if you're willing to do it, join me. Garner chanted "I can't breathe" 11 times. Before we get up, I'd like to do that. I can't breathe. 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 Chalked. Does anyone want to be chalked? If there's anybody who wants to help chalk, here's some chalk. Any Yeah, let's do it. All right, so we have a speak out component. If you have something to say, get up here, get the bullhorn, make your voice heard. Also, I just wanted to say, please add to what justice is. There's markers. I want to put this somewhere on campus. If you have something to say about what you think justice is, write it, draw it, put it. It matters.
Whoever would like to speak out is welcome to come forward. You may use the bullhorn or not.
You can stand on this little stool on the
That's
bottom
pretty
step
fun.
that I brought
Yeah.
from home, but you don't need to, obviously. So.
Yeah?
So really, it's like, I think anything you want to say, the two questions I might have is just, you know, what do you think about what's going on, and what do you want to do about it, right? So this is a time for discussion. You can say anything you want.
Hi, what I want to talk about is just something personal.
Put them.
Something personal. Can you hear me?
Kind
I have a son who's ready to go to college, and as he prepares to go off to a college or a university, one of the things that I have to teach him and we have to talk about is perception threat. So as a young African American, as he begins his college career, perception threat becomes an issue for him every day. And that's something that he's going to have to struggle with, and something as a mom that I would have to struggle with too as well. Whew.
I just want to say I had a couple students ask me about what do we think we're going to do? What are we going to change by our last week's Speak Out in March, by our die-in? And there's a famous quote that you may have heard from Margaret Mead, and I think it's appropriate now to revisit it. She said something to the effect of, right, never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. As Howard Zinn says, you can't be neutral on a moving train. We may or may not be able to change anything here, but doing nothing will not change a thing. So when your friends ask you, what do you think you're going to change? What's going to be different from this? We don't know, but we're taking a first step and we're going to try. So engage your friends, engage your colleagues, your mom, dad, around the dinner table. Do the little things. It's the little things that will really make a difference in the end.
I'm not going to climb up, but, and I'll just say one quick thing. Remember Lincoln, the nation divided against itself can't stand. So we have to come together. We have to understand each other's rage, perhaps. And we have to understand the deep history that Carl was talking about. But also, again, remember, we're not rational. If we think of history, we are not rational. So we have to really take time to feel and have compassion and empathy, and then come together. Find that as a basis for coming together in peace. Thank you.
I want to talk a little bit about my grandson, who's a 8-year-old. Who's an 8-year-old biracial child, a black child. And last year, he has a cousin who plays with guns. And he would bring him guns to play with, toy guns. I don't like guns, so I threw them out anyway. But I also said, you can't bring them to him. You can't bring them. And I was told I was overreacting. And then I watched a young boy get shot in Cleveland. And I know I'm not overreacting. What does it tell us? That black children have to play to a different standard than other children. At a very early age, they have to know that what other kids can do, maybe they can't do because their lives are precarious.
I'll just say something briefly. As a white man who was raised in a middle-class, upper-middle-class home, I would not say for a minute that my parents or my family was intentionally, directly, outwardly racist, but I think that smog I was talking about earlier has certainly pervaded my family, as it has pervaded so many families, and I feel that growing up in a predominantly white community and being surrounded by predominantly white people and having my only representations of people of color, particularly black men, being what you saw on the news and what you saw in movies. I grew up cultivating a prejudice. I grew up with my own prejudices. It wasn't until I started to inform myself and I started to read and I started to talk about this and I started to write and I started getting involved in events like this that I feel that things started to shift in me. I'm not saying I'm enlightened. I'm not saying that I have necessarily completely rebounded or gotten past everything that I've been raised in, but I'm trying, and I ask that's all I ask of anybody and everybody, to try.
I just wanted to speak briefly on what was just touched on. I was raised in a similar situation. I didn't really come in contact with anyone of color until I was probably in 6th grade, which is pretty disgusting, I think. I mean, it's hard to you know, you don't realize subconsciously what's going on in your mind when your only preconceptions and notions of another race is what you see on TV, film, movies, and what you've learned in history books, because it's largely inaccurate. And also, at the same time, when you're raised in such an area, a lot of people who maybe are of different races or ethnicities or backgrounds sort of hide that, which is really sad, because they think in order to fit in, they have to put a mask on, since they are possibly of a Latino, Hispanic, or black or other background, which is also pretty screwed up. And also, I feel like a lot of these officers are probably raised in a similar light, and then, you know, they get a gun and a badge, and they think that everyone who's dark, predominantly, you know, teenage males especially, is somehow a threat a priori before they even say anything, which is why I think a lot of these things take place. There's also an interesting thing I read about, there was an officer who choked a white college student unconscious but didn't do any other harm, and he got like suspended without pay, whereas you can kill a black guy and you don't have any repercussions, which is really, really screwed up. And there's a long history of that. Another thing too was, there's been more people this year killed by officers, cops, versus ISIS, Americans, which is another thing that's quite interesting.
Yes.
Yeah, a number of things. So, I mean, if somehow an African American is by default more dangerous than a terrorist organization with AKs, I think we need to revisit that on a national level immediately. Also, I think it starts at a localized level. You can't expect a whole entire nation of people to all of a sudden change, you know, with a blanket statement. I think it involves a lot of collective community type things, speaking with friends, family, and otherwise. Even things like Facebook, where you can connect with people on a more virtual level, but even still, I have a blog myself which has spurred many productive conversations where you can bring up issues and converse with various people with various thoughts and mindsets. I just don't think anyone can honestly say that you know, you can justify what is pretty obvious. I just look at the criminal rates, the incarceration rates, the murder rates, the drug rates, everything is very much skewed towards people of color getting, you know, much worse sentences for even petty crimes involved with just having a bag of weed on them or something. So there is a very long history that needs to be in the conscious minds of everyone, especially people who have the right to vote and things, to recognize that there's major issues that stem from a long history of racism and prejudice.
Thank you.
For those that aren't convinced that the justice system can be racist, I just want to mention 2 cases that really bothered me and that I think really proves that you know, something wrong with the justice system. One is a case in 1984, Daryl Hunt. He served 19 and a half years for they falsely accused him of raping a white woman. Later on, he went to trial, and there was DNA evidence that proved that he didn't rape this woman. But at first, he lost the trial, and he went to jail after that. And later on, he was released, but it proves that even with DNA evidence, the jury still they didn't release him, and I think there's something wrong with that. Another incident I want to talk about is the case of the Central Park 5, the rape of a white jogger in 1989. 5 juvenile boys served over 10 years in prison for a crime that they didn't commit in Central Park. When they were released, when they were on trial originally, there was a big media sensation about it. Donald Trump, he said some things about them. But then when they were released and it was found out that they really didn't rape this woman, there was no media attention for that. They filed a lawsuit against the city. It took a long time. It was only this year that I think they got money from the lawsuit. So I think if you look into these cases, and there's many other cases out there, it's really sad. There's something wrong with the justice system. And, I think people should really look into it.
So I just have a point that I want to make really quick. One thing that the system, the cops, particularly white cops, are doing to try and flip the script on us. I don't know if you guys heard this, but the cops in New York City actually filed a lawsuit against the city because they feel like they're the ones being victimized, like they're the ones who are being targeted. Now you have all these protests going on, and cops don't feel safe anymore because of this stuff that's happening right now. And I just wanted to, let you guys know that that's something we can't happen. So I thank everyone for, being here today because we're stopping that from happening. So that's awesome.
Yeah, I've never used one of these things.
Hold down and press the button.
And speak loud when you pull the trigger, basically.
Okay. I want to address the media. And Charlie cried out Ebola a few minutes ago, and I got thinking about that. We would think from the media coverage of the Ebola epidemic in Africa that it's sort of the first time that this has happened and all these people are dying. Let me point out a couple things. There were 2 epidemics of Ebola in Zaire and Sudan in the late 1970s, but they only killed black Africans. No white people were involved. Now, what happens this time? We get white doctors, white nurses who get it, who are very sick, and all of a sudden it becomes a real problem. Black lives do not matter in that case to the media. Just a quick story also. When I was in high school, I went to a very poor high school, which was lily white. And when Martin Luther King was killed, there were about 3 of us who were saddened and shocked by this. 3 of us, just think about that. And we were sitting looking very, very gloomy, and we were crying. The principal went by and he asked us what was the matter. And we said Martin Luther King was assassinated. And he said, I know, but it doesn't matter. He said, it only happens to them. We're safe up here. We're white. Is that education?
I just want to start with one question for everybody. How many of you, when you were younger, had a toy gun? That's it? Come on, more people must have played with a toy gun.
Count water guns. Count water guns.
Now imagine being shot because you were carrying one of those. Imagine being choked out for selling loose cigarettes without a warning. In the case of Eric Garner, he was selling loose cigarettes in the corner. Local businesses complained, and instead of sitting down and talking with them, giving them a warning, cops went in, took what, 6 cops to take him down. 6 cops, no warning, came up behind him. It's a chokehold that has been banned by the NYPD since 1993. And despite, the 11 cries that I can't breathe, he was still taken down. And he was killed. And selling loose cigarettes is not really, I don't think it's a capital crime. There's been a lot of issues in this country. A lot. Most recently, you can say the CIA torture report that just came out the other day. But that wasn't really much of a secret. We all knew what was going on. So a lot of things need changing in this country. The justice system is probably one of the biggest, if not the biggest. And, like the protests that are going on all across the country and internationally as well. From, New York to San Francisco and Delhi, India, to London, England, all over the world. And it's happening because of the fire that was started in Ferguson, Missouri, and just all over the world. That was probably what really kick-started it. And that fire is spreading quickly, and people are really quickly waking up and they're realizing what needs to be changed. And there's a lot of these things that people are being killed over. They don't deserve to die for carrying a toy gun, or for selling loose cigarettes, or many other cases that probably don't make headlines. And I think it's our job as citizens of America to take back what America really is.
Yeah.
We got to take it back, and this is how it starts. And it started in Ferguson, it starts in New York, it starts in San Francisco, it starts in Berkeley, in Oakland, Chicago, Detroit, Newark, the list goes on, and it starts here.
Branchburg.
It starts at Raritan Valley. And how you can do it? Get your friends involved, spread the truth, and let them know what's actually going on. Wake them up.
Hi everyone. I just wanted to mention a couple of things. One, if you're interested in some of the information that we've collected, I have extra copies. There's, again, in the media, there's, a lot of stories that talk about how racism is a thing of the past and is either, occurring because of an individual, but there is absolutely incontrovertible evidence that racism is systemic. That means it is part of a system. It is part of the media, the criminal justice system, education. It is part of the system, and that is something that we really need to be able to tackle on a widespread basis to really address and dismantle. Finally, I just want to mention that there's been, student protests at Harvard and Princeton and all of these elite Ivy colleges, and they're the ones that are getting all the attention. And I think it reinforces an unfortunate stereotype that they're the only ones that care about social justice. And I think we need to continue this kind of action to be able to say that faculty, students, staff, and administrators at community colleges care just as much about social justice as anybody else.
One last thing from me. I just want to say, in light of what everybody's been saying about the media and about all that, shape the narrative. Don't let the media shape the narrative for you, okay? The story that's going around, the narrative that's being shaped is pro-white supremacy. Fight against that, resist that. Do stuff like this, talk to people, know this information that's being put out here, know the frickin' facts, and shout them from the rooftops.
If anyone else wants to say anything, come up now. No? Yeah, come on. Okay, good. I'm trying to get a couple of stragglers here. Just pass me.
Yeah, I don't really know what to think about really all of this. I can only really think about it through, I guess, my kind of solipsistic way of thinking as, you know, like, as an Asian American. When I think of it through those lenses, I can't help but feel like that living here in a predominantly Caucasian society, I feel more culturally white than I do feel Asian here. And I feel, just to kind of elaborate that, I feel more American when I go overseas and I'm not here, and I feel more, or I want to feel more Chinese here, but I can feel like various societal pressures on me to conform to some way that this predominant society can understand and categorize me. And I think that's a pressure that is very much in play in these discussions. And I don't know, it's anecdotal, but there's this instance, this case that a friend of mine brought up of this really old Asian guy in New York, and he was jaywalking, and he didn't actually even understand English, but this police officer was telling him to get off the streets, and he wasn't, I guess, complying because he didn't understand. And this like 80-year-old guy ended up, you know, being pushed to the ground and beaten. And I think for me personally, I think I can identify more with this narrative of that people, this overarching society and the structures that come with it want to direct this narrative and to force you into these boxes that are more easily understood. And just to bring this again, I guess, to my own cultural conceptions, like someone brought up, like, you know, has anyone had toy guns before? And I really never have, and it's just interesting for me to think about how in Chinese society, at least, it's almost like weapons are like feared. And I brought home this a friend gave me a knife for my birthday, and my parents were like absolutely horrified by this, and they I don't even know where it is to this day, but I just keep on thinking of how like certain, you know, predominant societies want to control you. And I don't know, I think that's definitely something you think about. It's definitely an issue of justice and how we go about it. Thanks.
Please immortalize what you have to say about justice on the justice thing. I really want to get that hung up so that we have our voices and they're there. If anyone else does have anything else to say, I just wanted to mention one other quick thing. With Tamir Rice, he was shot within less than 2 seconds. 2 seconds. The video has it. I've played it more times than I should have because I just was absolutely like, how did this happen? To me, it's also about professionalism. It's about following codes of conduct. If someone's under arrest, tell them they're under arrest. Don't just shoot them or chokehold them or do something like that. And I know as a white woman, I mean, I barely even get a ticket. I mean, I'm really serious. I get pulled over, they're like, oh, you have a child, oh, you were going 80, oh, too bad, go. Literally, that's the reaction I get. And when you have friends of color tell you their other experiences and how drastically different they are, you're kind of like, wow, privilege is invisible. I can't see it, but it's there. White lady going 80, not a threat, go right, oh, okay, don't do it again. Literally. I forget my registration, my license, they're like, oh yeah, you have good intentions, you're white. Literally, that's what happens. Not cool. And when you are friends with people of color, I grew up in Queens, I grew up in a very diverse area, and I had a lot of friends of all different backgrounds. They used to make me do experiments with them. They said to me, hey, go into that store, see what happens. I was like, nothing, why? Now watch me go into that store. And I would say, oh my God, this is not made up. This is absolutely how society views things. And I have to say that I don't know exactly how to change this, but we have to get people who have invisible privilege to at least acknowledge it exists, to at least say, hey, this is really unfair. Because when you see something's unfair, see something, say something, right? Why not? Okay, so anybody else have any final closing remarks? Or you want to? Yeah, go, talk. Okay, it seems like we're losing the Yeah, just right there. Yeah, you got it. Cool.
Well, good morning. It's cold. What's up? Do you know how much Darren Wilson got after the entire trial ran through and they said that he wasn't addicted? Over that. And do you know why? Because of pure stupidity. And also because the education here is no longer seeing anything that's actually going on in the real life. I went to a really, really poor school, out all the way at bumblefuck wherever, and there was only 5 black kids at that school, okay? And we would have drug dogs come through every 3 months because someone would call in with a bomb threat because they didn't want to take a test that day, okay? And every time I would see state troopers come up to them and sniff them instead of coming to us white kids over here, even though 60% of that school was smoking weed and probably 20% had it on them. And the fact of the matter is that state troopers couldn't spend a single moment thinking, maybe I should back the hell off these fucking black kids who have not done anything for the next 3 months, instead of coming out to the kids who were actually put into rehab, were actually arrested before for selling drugs and selling heroin. Maybe I should check them out first before I go for them, but it wasn't ever questioned. Now, what's happening right now is that they're trying to get together enough funds, President Obama is, to get body cameras onto police officers. But I like to point out, Trayvon Martin, every time it would come up, someone asked for evidence. Every single time Mike Brown's case would come up, someone asked for evidence. They would ask for something other than witness testimonies. 4 witness testimonies that came in and said the exact same thing, other than Darren Wilson's complete story of seeing Mike Brown as a monster. But here, Eric Garner, he had a video. You can go on YouTube right now and see it at 720p and see how he died. You can see right now how he died. I see y'all with smartphones, you can do this now. But the thing is, you have evidence there. You have witness testimony, you have video, and you have the entirety of a movement to back up a case, and nothing happened. So what are we supposed to do now? We're doing what we can, but what can we do now? We do education, we can do awareness, we can try to change the system, but the system can't change unless we actively do something. And thankfully y'all are here, which is great, but we need to start now. What happened in the 60s, before that in the 50s, in the 1900s, during the part of when slavery was a part of everyone's lives? What we really need to do is look back and do something. Because 60 years ago, they are doing what we're doing now. And if they say we're in a post-racist society, then I call fucking bullshit. There is no point in standing here and saying, well, the system's going to change. Because if it hasn't changed in the past whatever amount of time, then there is something going on that we're not recognizing, and that is when we need the education. That is when we need to realize that privilege is alive and well within every person here. Racism isn't born into it, it is taught consistently from the beginning of birth to death. And the fact of the matter is that I have to watch people that I respect say complete racist bullshit to them and have it be completely fine, and then watch as my only black friend gets pulled over every other day for not even speeding. For the fact of the matter is that she has to come out of the car with her hands up because the freaking country bumpkin cops think that she's carrying a rifle, and she's not at all. Thank you.
Hello. I wasn't going to speak, but I don't really even know where to start. Going off of what you were saying before, privilege is definitely around. From my own experience, I was pulled over maybe 4 or 5 times before I ever got a DUI. Should have gotten one. Why? Because I was white, probably. I ended up in jail at one point, and the prison was filled with African Americans, and I got out of there really quickly, and I was treated pretty damn well. And that was probably because I was white, and I got a real look at that. I think that the problem, I don't think it's the same kind of racism that she was referring to back in the 60s or before that. I think it might be, but it's less hating black people and more the association, maybe even subconscious association with income and equality, and how the majority of African Americans live in poverty, and that's an assumption, and that over time is ingrained and then taught from their parents down. I think that a lot of people here probably have parents that reinforce racism, and that's sad, but they learned it from their parents, so we need to break that cycle. That's really all I have, but I just...
Hi everybody. First of all, sorry for my English because I'm an international student here for a few months. I'm gonna back to my country next week. I'm from Brazil, and one and a half year ago, I never been to a protest, and it was in June in my country last year. Like a few people like here, we started to go to the streets, and it was the same thing. Because in Brazil, police kills black young poor people systematically. Very, very worse than here. Why? People don't know. Media covers, media show us what media wants. So how people know? How people know what happens? Is speak, think, talk to others, and act. If you want to change the society, act. The political system, it's like my country, here is the same. It's taken by organizations, by the big companies. If you want to change, you gotta fight, and you gotta go, organize yourself. And this is the country that created the democracy, right? It's so good to come here. I didn't expect to see like all this thing happening, and it's awesome. I'm gonna take a message to my country with me. I'm seeing this happening in many other countries. In Mexico, it's happening a revolution there. I don't know if you all guys know, but it's happening. And you Americans, you put the democracy, you took it from the Greek, and show to us how to do it, how people take power, the real power, you know. So I just want to leave my message. I know I'm a privileged in my country for being white, but I have black friends there, and I know how they suffer. And if I disagree for what the others suffer, I cannot be white. I cannot be standing. I need to go and change the system. And that's my message for you. Thank you.
Hi everybody. I just wanted to build off what John said before. Racism is still alive today, and there's something that we need to do about it. The media portrays racism, and that is one of the main logs to the fire. And I just wanted to say, I wish to challenge every single one of you here today to end racism for good. Take a final stand and finally put it out.
So I'm really inspired by all these things, and I just had a thought related to, what's her name? Igor. And also to something that Karen was talking about that's happening in Hunterdon County. I thought it'd be amazing. We're all here together, like-minded. We all want to change something. It'd be really amazing to start maybe some kind of anti-racism organizing network that could bring together students and faculty. We know we're encountering a lot of resistance here on campus just for doing this, right? People are vandalizing the stuff that we put up. There's a lot of racism here. And we're all like looking to what can we do? Maybe we could form an anti-racism organizing network and like start educating and being activists. I think if you want to do something like that, maybe talk to Andrea, give her your name, or like talk to me. My name is Carl Linskog, or Brandon Hepper to teach philosophy, or someone. Find a way to plug in and we'll facilitate it from there.
Does anyone have a piece of paper? Because maybe we can make like an email list or something. Anyone? Piece of paper, pen, on a college? I have my office, of course.
Karen got me. Most prepared.
Yeah, what is that? I'm so prepared. I'm like, I feel like such a slacker. All right, so if you want to put your email on, also if you want to propose something, I mean, I don't really know how to go about it, so I just kind of started email blasting everyone and putting up a whole bunch of flyers. But I really would like it if this comes from students. I mean, I mean, this is your campus. I want to hear your voices more. I don't get to do it enough, and I think we should try to continue the momentum on this. So if you're comfortable getting on an email list, posing your thoughts about the next action we could take, I would love to do that, because I think that we need to change the culture of this college to be one that really does try to get into social movements and get into social justice. Just one more reminder, please sign my justice thing on your way out. I'm going to be sad if it's not filled up, because justice is a lot of things. I want to see what it is. Anybody else? Yes, no, done? Okay, cool.
So if anyone wants any of the information on the boards here, I have extra copies.
We could start a club if anyone wants to. I'll advise. Yeah? Okay.
So who was involved with organizing this giant protest?
Well, I proposed it, but then it sort of took on life of its own.
How did that happen?
I just was like, I got, actually, Charlie was the one who really encouraged me, because I just, all of a sudden, like, woke up on Friday morning really angry, like, more angry than usual. And I had slept in, so I was a little bit like, why am I this angry? And I'm like, I'm still angry about Garner. And then I was like, I want to do something. So then I just hopped on my email, and you responded to me within, like, 2 seconds. And I felt like, you know, some sense of support, and it just kind of, like, went from there.
Okay. So was this anger, do you think it was directly, I guess, inspired by the previous protest, the previous demonstration?
Well, the previous demonstration was really, to me, very powerful. I really enjoyed participating in it. But I think it was more that with the Ferguson case, you could sort of say, oh, there's some ambiguities. Okay, there's some sort of inconsistencies and testimonies. Okay, I can kind of maybe, some bat squeak echo, maybe understand it a little bit. Not like I was happy about it, but like I could sort of rationalize it a little. But with Garner, it was on video. And it just seems like here he was just saying, why are you guys following me? And then the next thing you know, he's dead on the pavement, and no one even tries to resuscitate him. Like all these people who could resuscitate him were just like, oh, well, I guess he's dead. Let's just leave him in handcuffs. I mean, it was just like, I just, the inhumanity of it just was really what I think was a driving force for me.
Okay. How about you guys? What was the driving force for you?
Go ahead.
To participate today?
Yeah.
I think that like a lot of Americans have been watching this happen again and again and again. You know, like before Michael Brown, it was from Marley Graham, and it was just, you know, it's always happening. It keeps happening. And I was even more upset by the Michael Brown outcome. For me, it wasn't. It was just as clear, but as Andrea says, you know, you have a video of this one, I'm glad. I'm really glad we're doing something here. I think it needs to happen everywhere, and it is happening everywhere. So it should happen here too.
Well, you know, I've been working on racial justice issues for, I don't know, more than 15 years, and I teach a class on race and justice, and well, race in American literature and popular culture, but it's ultimately about justice. And I just think that it's really important to help students understand what's going on. I think students want to understand, but they don't always have the tools available to put the pieces together, especially when the media is not exactly front and center with a nice, clear critique of systemic racism. And so if we can help students better understand what's going on and help them take action, that's something that I'm really interested in.
I wanted to, you know, like Karen, you know, I've been involved, you know, as a teaching this kind of about this for, you know, she's been doing it longer than I have, but I teach my English 1 and English 2 are social justice oriented classes. People do it as a special topic. So I've been talking about this for a long time. I've been teaching it for a long time. It feels like a long time over the past few years. And I was saying, it was one of those things where I've always wanted to get involved in more direct action, but I didn't really know what my entry point could be. And then I proposed the action last week, and then Andrea proposed the action this week, and I said, great, we have momentum, let's roll with it.
What do you want participants to walk away learning? Do you want to start?
Not really. It's somebody else.
Maybe the systemic nature of the problem, just purely speaking for myself. The systemic nature of the problem, the fact that racism is not just an individual issue. It's not just a person-to-person problem. I mean, yes, of course, it manifests itself in person-to-person encounters. That is what Eric Garner really was. It's on the surface, but how all that arises from the system and from a system that's rotten.
Yeah, and not only, is there a systemic injustice? It is our responsibility to acknowledge it and to do something about it.
I think I finally got it. I really want them to walk away feeling empowered, that they can not only take knowledge of things that are happening in their own lives or in the world, but the fact that they can at least exercise their freedoms of speech and at least figure out that where their place is in the world and what they want to do and what their role is.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of students here who, because of what a dangerous place this is to be right now, could be the next Michael Brown, and they know that very well. So I think it's useful to know for them and for everyone to know that they have allies. We're doing this out of solidarity. We want a more just society, and also for students to know that they're part of something that's going on around the world now. And if we look back and see this as a historic turning point, beginning of a movement that really changes the country, then that will be amazing for students to have been part of that.
Cool. Can you talk a little about what exactly happened with the vandalizing? What type of vandalizing took place? And, what do you think that says about the school and about the problems that are still going on?
Flyers were taken down from the bathrooms almost immediately. We put up flyers, and within less than half a day, they were all out of the bathrooms. Now the bathroom, the reason I put them in there is that I wanted students to actually read. Most students don't, so we figured let's put them in the bathroom where they wouldn't expect to read something. And it's always nice to have reading material available sometimes. And the other thing is, too, the flyers were ripped out of the elevator a lot. I kept putting those back up. And a couple of the flyers, I can't speak to this because I didn't see them, were vandalized.
Yeah, at least 3 flyers right in Somerset had negative messages written
The
on
West Building, too, had a bunch thrown all over and ripped up.
So, I took down ones that had inappropriate things written on them. And we just kept trying to replace them with clean ones.
Okay. What do you think that says about the school and about the issue that's going on right now?
We have a long way to go.
Yeah, and I think also, a lot of people just don't understand what's going on. And so if you don't really understand what's going on, you're vulnerable to to messages in the media that reinforce an attitude that racism is not a serious problem, and that people that are complaining about it are just, wasting their time, and that it's, not an appropriate thing to be concerned about. And so I think that, some students or employees here who really are not thinking carefully and critically about the media are vulnerable to that. And certainly regarding students, faculty, we're, one of our jobs is to help students think critically and to really question what they see. And so I think, it's a learning process. Then there are some people that are, willfully, desire to be negative and to share that, and that's really unfortunate. But I would say that's the minority, and the majority of people who are taking things down don't understand.
Have you had faculty that have come up to any of you and voiced, well, why are you doing this? This is inappropriate?
Feedback. In fact, some of the faculty members mentioned that, well, why would you do this during exam time? Is this really what the students need? What difference do you think you're making? I fielded a couple of emails like that, and I got one from a very irate student as well that was like, this, why are you upholding this idea that he's a criminal? You should keep your opinions to yourself. You're not doing anything productive. If you want to do something productive.
About Michael Brown or about this one?
No, this one. Yeah,
Okay.
Garner.
This?
Oh yeah. No. She was like, you're teaching everyone to be sheep. Blah blah blah. I mean, and we kept.
That was from a student?
Yeah.
Is there anything that you can do?
Oh, I sent emails back. I certainly said, well, you're entitled to your opinion, but I think your opinion's dead wrong, and here's why. I mean, I felt like it was a nice exchange to dialogue. I'm not upset about it, but I think that it just shows that the college is a little uncomfortable with social action at this moment in time. Not to say that that's what it's going to look like, 6 months from now, a year from now, or whatever. And I always remain very optimistic and hopeful about everything, because I feel like if I didn't, I wouldn't be able to keep smiling and moving on.
Okay. I mean, I think the nature of the resistance sort of mirrors the resistance happening throughout our society, right? So like some of the things that were written on those flyers are like, oh, well, Garner was arrested so many times before. He's a criminal, and that's what like everyone who's resistant to this Black Lives Matter movement and everything is saying, well, these guys are criminals, and they look at these specific cases to try to justify this act of police violence and that act of police violence, right? So it's part of a longer embedded history of criminalizing black men in particular, and so they're reacting to that, especially when people are challenging white supremacy that upholds that, so yeah.
I got one last question. Does anybody say, well, why is this group of white faculty members wanting to do something for someone who's not even their race?
And also it's not just white faculty members, it's
right.
You had all races involved in the organizing?
Well, but also keep in mind that
we have a very white faculty.
I mean, out of the full-time
it's the elephant
faculty,
in the room. What do we have, 3?
we have 110 or 115 full-time faculty. At least 100 of them are white.
It's just the makeup of the school.
Yeah, and that's a problem.
But these are human rights issues. These are definitely human rights issues. I mean, I think that if we're going to look at this like this is a black issue, I think then we have even further to go than I think.
I don't think we're looking at that. I think the media has told us we have to look at it like that.
Yeah.
So I talked to you the other day about some of the comments on internet, nj.com. Some of those comments I've read myself, and they were just the facts were just completely wrong, and they were trying to justify what they had to say with these false facts. Where do you think where's a good place for people to get the facts to learn about what's truly going on?
I would say media outlets that are not these corporate, stooges.
Definitely not Fox.
I mean, Carl and I had a discussion about Democracy Now! It's a good source in many cases. I'm a big fan of alternate.org. I would say that, I have to admit though, those sites of course are going to have their spin as well because they have their agenda, their politics. I think that they are more faithfully reporting the facts than a lot of other places. But if you really want the facts, then go to the facts, go to the numbers. When I did research for the signs that Karen put up on the foam board, I ended up doing a lot of my research looking at like the Center for Justice Statistics, the Department of Justice's actual statistics, and actually looking at the data that's up there, and I realized that we're not all statisticians. I'm certainly not. I certainly, and to say, okay, so here's the data. Here's what I think it means. Now, having looked at the data, now let's look at what Alternate's saying. Now, let's even look at what Fox is saying and see how how both sides are representing the data, and see how do we negotiate that.
Yeah, I think you need to look at multiple sites and understand, well, what is the purpose of that, of that media? Is it profit or is it nonprofit? And if it's nonprofit, what is their mission statement? And so, you know, building on the information that Charlie collected for the signs, I looked at the ACLU and the Center for American Progress, and even went to see, well, what was the New York Times reporting as the paper of record, and also the paper that covers New York City, especially. And, you know, really tried to make sure that we were putting together information that was well-researched, that was documented, and, you know, again, looking at a variety of different sites. But one of the things that, you know, at some point maybe we can talk about as we move forward is helping students especially, you know, with recommendations of articles that are really clear, books that are really clear, The New Jim Crow by Michelle Alexander. Again, just really clear analysis about the problems that really give a much broader and more thorough analysis than any kind of 30-second soundbite you'll find.
I have often heard people say that if a website ends in either .org or .edu, that is a more reliable, accurate source to get your news from versus like .com or something.
Well, not necessarily, because you know, .edu, anybody who is affiliated with that organization can put up their own website. I mean, I can put up anything I want on my page here. It doesn't mean it's reliable.
Yeah.
You know, so I would be really careful about that and really look at, you know, is the website a website for an organization? And if so, what is the mission of that organization? And who is that organization ultimately accountable to? Is it to corporate sponsors or is it to the people? And, you know, really ask questions about that.
Prime example of that, there's a website, there's a .org website out there that is purporting to be information about Martin Luther King.
Oh, yeah.
It's owned by Stormfront, which is a white supremacist organization, and the whole point of it is to smear Martin Luther King and his legacy. And you know, they have the .org to give it an aura of legitimacy. But you know, if you actually look closely at it, you see that it's actually, you know, a smear campaign.
Yeah.
You don't necessarily have to be an organization to have an ORG.
Right.
So I realize that this is something that you kind of just came up with during the protest. But do you have any ideas for the new organization that you want to set up on campus?
Karen had a really good
idea. One of the, and this again is just an idea that we'll need to talk about, but one of the things that we could consider is some type of a social justice, social action coalition, not a formal club, but a sort of loose coalition of people that are interested in taking action on different social justice issues. So this could, you know, would certainly need to include students, faculty, staff, and administrators, and, you know, rather than just have one person in charge, we can kind of divide things up and, you know, figure out what are the different things we're interested in working on, how can we do it, how can different people reach out to their respective constituencies in order to make sure that, you know, we're really getting all the voices that we want to.
If you're a coalition as opposed to a club, would that be that you're not representing the college? Because you're still doing it on college campus, and what wouldn't the
well, but it's still for employees and students.
But it's still less. It's less restrictive.
You wouldn't have to follow as many rules. Is the thing that I was trying to get at, right?
It's not about rules. I mean, you know, the math club is a great club, and it serves its purpose for math students that are really interested in math and with math faculty. But you know, student clubs tend to be very specific.
Yeah.
And I think student clubs are amazing. I was a club advisor for 6 years to the Social Justice Club, and that was one of the first clubs that addressed any kind of social justice issue on campus. But I think we have a huge number of clubs right now that cover a wide variety of issues, and I think that works well, but we need something that would bring the interested clubs together. So just adding one more club, I don't think would really help anything. It would actually hurt the clubs. We don't want to compete with clubs. We want to bring clubs together, and faculty together, and staff, and administrators, to work productively together. And also the club meeting schedule is not, is always in conflict with the faculty meeting schedule. So faculty can never attend club meetings, and we would need something that, you know, we can all, you know,
this
attend
makes
together.
it more organic. This makes it much more organic. It makes it something where any one member could propose something. It makes it so that it's more of a constructivist endeavor, which is very important to some members of the faculty as well.
Which is the kind of answer I was looking for.
And I was talking with a student who was really interested in this after the event. She does stuff with the students of the Women's Center, and she was saying, you know, it would be great to bring these clubs that are just sort of the way Karen was talking about, that are already interested in doing this sort of stuff, like Black Student Alliance or Latino, Students of the Women's Center. And if we call it like a coalition or an organizing network that can include students and faculty, then we can like do stuff together, and when clubs want to do their own thing, they can do that too. But it's just, it's a new body that could operate democratically.
Like it could be a springboard for bigger ideas.
Okay. Do you guys have anything to say?
Well, you mostly asked the question I was going to ask, but like I just want to see like what would be your vision for this new group or this new network that you want to organize? I mean, you've pretty much said already what you like what your vision like you would love to make on campus, but is there something else as educator? Do you see that you have any power that you could actually like bring to this vision?
Well, I mean, education has to be like the priority. But I think what's interesting is it's not just educating students; it's educating us as well. And so, you know, most of the faculty that are involved in this don't have a lot of experience doing this kind of thing. And I think that it's important for faculty to learn how to, you know, run events like this and how to reach out. And so I think it's actually really important that it's a learning experience for both faculty and students, and again, interested staff and administrators. Faculty bring some of the background information. We bring strategies for critical thinking. We bring history, a lot of history, that's really important. And we can help students connect the dots, but we're certainly not, I mean, most faculty that are interested in this don't have a lot of experience with organizing, and so that's where, you know, everyone kind of needs to be able to work together, to be patient, to be comfortable with mistakes, and to really think about, you know, what are the issues that we're interested in, what are some different types of events that we could run. You know, they're all different kinds of things. There's like an action like this today. There could be a film screening. There could be a guest speaker. You know, and that how can those events build on each other and not just be an isolated event? Often we have a single shot event. It's over, and then we don't talk about it again. I mean, I'd really love to see something that builds.
Would you, would this be something that you'd open it up to, like, say you're going to run an event like this and there's an organization in the community that would be helpful in getting the outside public involved in the event as well? Would you invite them into the campus?
The more the merrier, man.
Yeah, we invited
With social
outside
justice,
groups to
of course.
the event today. I mean, it was a little short notice that didn't really work out, but they were, you know, absolutely.
I mean, I think if this thing starts to take shape, what we'd have to do is invite all participants to come together, and we'd have to decide how we make decisions, and then we would decide all those things collectively as to how much we participate with outside groups and who does what and what roles. But I mean, that's great because we not only become a movement around an issue or a set of issues, but we learn how to be democratic in our operations.
I think historically about you know, the relationships between colleges and the communities that surrounded them, you know, during the civil rights movement, and just, you know, how the college, you know, so often was kind of a locus, you know, a focusing point, you know, for so much of this activity. But, you know, the local communities were brought in, you know, and they supported it, and, you know, they came inward and went outward. So I think that could be very powerful.
And I think in this area, most of the focus is on what's going on at Rutgers instead of what's going on at your local community college, even though Rutgers is part of our family.
Well, it doesn't have to be that way. Do you guys have anything else to say?
Yeah, so for the Michael Brown case, nobody really brought up the whole issue with Latinos, and it also even extends to Muslims. With this particular event, I heard a lot more people bring up Latinos, and I was really happy. And I'm sure there's more groups than just the two that I'm going to mention, but I feel like Muslims and Latinos are also part of like this triad that blacks are a part of getting like the most hate in this country. And I was wondering pretty much is, the first thing, do you think that it's fair to say that Latinos and Muslims get this an equal amount of hate and a different amount of hate? And is it or not important to include them in the same conversation or a different conversation? Like for me, I think if Muslims, blacks, and Latinos joined forces to like combat racism, it would be a lot more of a push behind it. And I just wanted to get your guys' thoughts.
I just want to say about the first part of your question, the idea that, do they get more hate or equal amounts of hate? One thing, I always teach in my social justice classes is that it's not productive to say who has it worse, And I'm talking about not just issues of which race has it worse and racism, but I mean, to say, well, is it, who has it worse? People who are people of color or gay people or transgender people? Because then it's distracting.
Yeah.
It turns you away from the focus, which is that all oppression is bad.
Yeah.
And that we should be focusing our attention on the people who are doing the oppressing. Rather than on saying I have it worse than you do or you have it worse than me. So let's be in our own little camps. And I'm sure you have a lot to say about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that one of the things that allows oppression to be so powerful is that it uses different tactics for different groups of people. So if we're talking about airport security, we might see a slightly different pattern than if we're talking about, who's getting pulled over on the highway.
Yeah.
Sure. So I think, but I think, again, it's not a competition, and it's important to understand how the system is working to disempower all of these groups in slightly different ways. But I also think there are models of coalition building. So when Stop and Frisk was, really came under scrutiny in New York City, groups that traditionally weren't necessarily working together as allies came together. I went to a presentation at a conference last month where there was in New York City, an African American civil rights group and a Muslim American civil rights group came together along with a lot of other people to work on addressing Stop and Frisk because they were both getting targeted. And, I think it's, one of the things that I'm really interested in my research is trying to fight back against the whole divide and conquer mentality and to see the common interests and to see the way the system is working in order to form coalitions. And I would certainly like to see, if we do decide, to work on some sort of a coalition, that it would bring together clubs of a wide variety of social, focus, intent and be able to see the common interests that people have.
It would be nothing. I would like nothing more than for people to band together and fight against systematic oppression in all of its forms.
I got some. Getting back to the actual event today, one, what was our ultimate aim in doing this event? And two, do you think we actually achieved what we set out to achieve? And
my original goal with this was to help students have a way to participate in social justice right here on campus. And it was also so that people could begin to start to process some of the egregious things happening in society right now and to see this moment of history for what it is and to realize that they have accountability to their children when they have them, and to their grandchildren to say, I wasn't sitting on my ass while this happened. So I feel like the goal was met for the students who were here, and I hope the next social action we have will start to cultivate a campus that invites these things and that doesn't rip down every single flyer, and that hopefully the next time we have something, that courtyard will be completely full.
And if an anti-racist organizing network or something like that comes out of that, that would be an awesome outcome, So I'm hopeful about that.
One last quick question I wanted to ask. Actually brings us back to the beginning. You had mentioned that they were going to start putting cameras on police officers' vests, little GoPros, I think they're called, what those little cameras are called. I love that idea, and I want that to happen, but do you really think it's going to change anything? I mean, with this Eric Garner guy, we have it on video and nothing happened, so what is putting a camera on a police?
Well, I mean, Rodney King was on video too.
And he got,
he was saying, well, it did create tons of riots and things like that, but, I mean, so it did do something, but, I mean, in either case, I think cameras are only as effective as the lens in which we view the video. If people are viewing the videos, he was resisting arrest, therefore he deserved to die, then no, cameras are not going to do jack.
Yeah.
But if you're...
But there could always be the, oh, I forgot to turn it on, or, oh, my shirt got in the way.
There's studies that have tried to test it in New Orleans, where it has a huge problem with police brutality. That's what's happened. Whenever there's been some questionable behavior, the camera must have gotten turned off. But in other places, it seems like that having cameras on the police actually has maybe deterrence or actually lessened. So, I don't know. I don't think it's sufficient.
What they need, I think, is laws saying if you don't have your camera on, then you get a check docked or you get suspended for a month or something.
Well, you know, panopticism, I mean, it's just the idea that we self-regulate by watching, you know, and that if people are watching us. I think there is some power to that, but there has to be, the people who would be the most self-regulated are the ones that are not the problem people to begin with, for the most part, because the self-regulating people generally self-regulate pretty well. I think it's just, and the ones that are obviously morally not quite, their compass is a little bit different, they're going to turn off the camera.
Also, we want more cameras watching everything. Like if the police come into your home, then not only are the police in your home, but they've got a camera. You might, you know, so that's part of this sort of post 9/11 discussion about surveillance. It's a complicated discussion.
Yeah. And I would just be careful about really understanding and thinking about all the ramifications. I mean, if they're wearing the camera, who is it recording? Is it only recording the person that they are engaging with?
Puts them under more scrutiny than someone.
But you'll hear them anyway.
Alexander has some concerns about it, and if she has concerns, I have concerns.
Well, because you can't see the scowl that's on the police officer's face that could be promoting or escalating the violence. You only see their view. Yeah.
Unless he has a partner looking at him.
That's true, but that's not always going to come into play. So that's like a hypothetical situation. If we're dealing with one officer or one person, I mean, you're not getting an objective perspective like we did with Garner, which to me, the objective perspective, I saw it as a crystal clear, like what happened here. Yeah. You know, it was
and
just.
I would second everything my colleagues are saying, but also would add that the camera issue becomes a Band-Aid on a wound.
Yeah.
You know, it's an attempt to I think the real danger of it is it's almost like I think I'm going to start creating a term calling it the Obama paradox. You know, people say, oh, we have a black president, racism solved. And I think that people might have the same reaction, oh, cops have cameras, problem solved. When in fact, the underlying issues of racism, the underlying systemic problem of racism did not go away with the election of a black president. The underlying issues of racism and the underlying issues of police brutality do not go away with cameras on cops.
I think with Obama, it just made it more in the public view and more out there that there is racism. It brought it more into the forefront.
Yeah, some of my students seem to think there's a conspiracy theory about all these egregious things happening, that people want to sort of do this as a backlash against Obama. And actually, a couple of my students really came up to me with this, sort of, I'm not sure if it's completely a conspiracy theory or not, but it was very interesting to notice where students are taking this and how, they're maybe viewing it as well.
A couple people throughout this event had talked about racism compared to the 1950s, compared to now. Some said it was the same, some said it was different. And another major event that changed the world, you had just said it a couple seconds ago, is 9/11. How do you think racism really has changed, for better or for worse, since 9/11?
Well, sometimes it's more subtle, but sometimes it's more deadly. I don't think it's really gone away, and I think we keep attempting to make it seem like it was in the deep historical past. I mean, I think even today in high schools they teach, like, they end with Martin Luther King, and then that's it. Like all of a sudden now we're so far beyond it. Yeah. And I think that really, in a way, it's become more insidious and much more dangerous.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think it's operating within the context of national security crisis. So that becomes just sort of like during the Cold War, it was about communism. This becomes the framework for justifying all sorts of things. So racism persists, of course. And then now we're in this 9/11 moment where it's terrorism. So for example, the Sensenbrenner bill in that was proposed but never became law, thank goodness, was about like making it a felony to be an undocumented person here and to help any undocumented person. Well, what did they call that? They always choose politically expedient names for their legislation. I don't know exactly, but it was something like the Border Control Protection and Anti-Terrorism Act, right? But that bill was basically a nativist, anti-immigrant, and racist expression, right? But now you can justify that after 9/11 by saying it's about national security.
And who would disagree with national security unless you're a terrorist, right? So then it's like this whole idea of finger pointing too.
Well, and also, I mean, just the advanced militarization of the police that has developed since 9/11, and all of the money, private corporate money that goes into the contractors, related to the war efforts, but in turn that money then is going into militarizing the police. And so that the system in that way is getting a lot more powerful, and so, which in turn then can, affect the way that racism is perpetuated. So I mean, I think there's just there's several dots that need to get connected there. But then the irony, of course, is that in some ways racism is more implicit and subtle than it was in the Jim Crow South, when there were the explicit, whites only, black only, signs, or colored only at the time. And so people don't notice it when it's more implicit.
Which makes white people forget about it and forget about white privilege, and makes them just, I mean, again, if they're just, being spoon-fed this media that just is like, oh, all these criminals, then it just creates a situation where it makes it harder to organize.
And it's not just white people either, it becomes a question of internalized racism, and you see people of color internalize, not all, I mean, obviously not everybody, but you have some people of color internalizing this notion that, we do just need to pull ourselves up by our bootstraps, and these people who are demonstrating in Ferguson or wherever else, they are being bad, and they need to, embrace the values of the dominant society, when in fact those values are not neutral values. They're values put in place by a white supremacist patriarchy. That value certain things that are perhaps not, are at the very least suspect enough to question.
Do you think because of our geographic location to like Washington, D.C. and to the 9/11 area in New York City, that we're seeing more of what you were talking about, the militarization of the police and them going over their overstepping their powers that they're given? Because
no, I think that's a national. I mean, I think
you don't think it's because of where we are. Maybe they're stepping. Yeah, because we're closer to where all the incidents.
Ferguson is in Missouri, in the middle of the Midwest. So I mean, and they were very well armed. And then in the Southwest, the arming is related to the border with Mexico. So,
yeah. So I guess every place has the reason why they're.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that
so
the
then scratch my question.
Is national. I mean, that's national.
Yeah.
That's not just. That's everywhere, unfortunately.
Okay. So you guys about.
And it's 3 o'clock if anyone has somewhere to be.
Yeah, I kind of do. Could somebody help me with taking down the banners? Because I promised I would give Michelle back her seat clamps. And
well, thank you everybody for.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Take your
I
time
really
out.
appreciate you guys.